In terms of top of funnel objectives like video views, which are largely should be considered longer term testing campaigns, you might monitor day to day. Outside of that, like there's really no reason you should be jumping inside of Ads Manager every single day looking for some meaning because it probably doesn't exist there.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 296, and we're going to be talking about ads, how to run them better, how to avoid wasting money, what to look at when you're running your ads, how to not panic when you're running your ads for your music. And I'm your host, Jack McCarthy, and with me, as always, is your other host, Circa, here to discuss advertising online for your music. Cirque, what's up, dude?
Not much, dude. Just being the other host. You know how I like to do it.
It feels better than co-host.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's co-host, sometimes it's other host.
I mean, I kind of know. But yeah, dude, other than that, just kicking it, enjoying life, cruising through tasks. Indies, if you're out there, you're like, oh, there's so many tabs open. I got all these tasks. Cruise through that shit. Okay?
There's always a lot to do. There's always an endless amount of tabs. And in this episode, we're going to talk about maybe one or two of those tabs. Your ads manager. This conversation stemmed from a discussion that we were having inside of our Indie Pro members community, our music marketing mastermind. If you're not a member of Indie Pro, you should join us, where we talk a lot about marketing your music online and how to do it better.
We sure talk a lot about it.
Yeah, all the time. We'll leave a link to Indie Pro in the show notes, as always. So if you're not in there, join us. But this whole topic of advertising, what to look for when you're running your ads, how to not get lost in metrics, and how to avoid burning money and not panicking came from a conversation in there. And this really isn't designed to be a masterclass in how to think like a media buyer, but we wanted to bring some insights to you guys who might be running ads for your music, maybe for the first time, or maybe for the 100,000th campaign that you're running, about how to maybe think a little bit differently about it, maybe do it so that you're not panicking so much, and unveil some things that we do day in, day out at the agency with the clients that we work with, and how we run a lot of ad campaigns without freaking out all the time. So I think this will be a fun one.
Yeah, it's definitely very necessary because it takes a while for even trained media buyers to get over this problem of they consistently fiddle with ads and panic early. So anything we can do to get you guys over that hump, regardless of what type of campaign you're running, I think is going to save you a lot of money and get you closer and quicker to a result.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of the main thesis of this whole discussion is, one, how to run campaigns better, both from a practical standpoint and from a technical standpoint, because platforms like Facebook ads, TikTok ads, Google ads, wherever it really might be,
Ads.
They're getting smarter by the day. And you fiddling with them after 13 minutes of your campaign being turned on isn't making them any smarter.
Not helping.
We can get that out of the way right here. Is when we turn on and launch new campaigns for many, many, many of our clients, regardless of the type of campaign that it might be, there's kind of like a don't touch it policy pretty early on. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit in the context of different types of campaign architectures that we think about when it comes to media buying.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Sweet. Let's get into it. Well, I think there's two ways to envision advertising campaigns. There's two kind of modes of advertising, right? You think about testing modalities and scaling or stability-based modalities. And I think it's really easy for newer advertisers, newer music marketers, artists that are getting into this themselves and getting their hands dirty. It's really easy to think that the two of those are going to be one thing, where it's like, I'm going to test a campaign and it's going to be scalable right from day one, and I'm not going to need to really think much about it, or I'm not going to need to do anything differently. It's just, I'm coming up with some creatives, I'm making great videos, and I'm writing great copy, and I'm going to run ads either to an offer or to just get new audiences, and it's going to work. And if it doesn't, I'm going to touch it until it does. And blurring those two modalities is probably the area where I think most people miss when it comes to advertising and the way they think about media buying.
Yeah, and like, to be clear, time was that we could do that. There was a very awesome, sick time. It's like learning about like the 80s and being like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
There was a very sick time in history where we could set up like conversion campaign, 8 different interest-based audiences, turn them off within a day as they don't do so well. Like, there was a time. That time's over now. So you really got to run things a little bit differently than might have been recommended by people who came up in that era, because that's all they've ever known. But kind of the problem here that we see happening out there for indies is that they get very nervous about a campaign, usually within the first day to 4 days, all of which is misguided unless you're testing. It's okay to get worried about a campaign if you're testing, but there's very specific circumstances where that might happen. So to set it all up, it's just like, how do you think about campaigns, ad campaigns in general?
Right.
You probably want to start thinking of your ad campaigns as an asset that appreciates in value if you do it the right way. If you do it the right way, they should become more valuable over time as you spend into them. And when you're testing, that's not the case. A stability campaign, something that you want to be stable over the long term, it should be an appreciating asset. A testing campaign should neither appreciate nor depreciate. It should, for a roughly defined cost, get you a roughly defined conclusion, something you want to know. And it shouldn't be too much guesswork as to like, it basically, like, if you're testing, it should be a budget that you're willing to burn just to get data. It's not supposed to produce results. And so the way to think about your campaigns overall, like when you're going to set up campaigns, you want to know, is this supposed to get me data, or is this supposed to produce a long-term result and remain stable across time? If you know those two things going into it, then we can really get specific about kind of how to troubleshoot different scenarios.
For sure, yeah. And I think it's funny now that you say it that out loud. That really is the approach that we take with a lot of our clients at the agency when going into testing mode, for example. Let's say we're testing a top of funnel campaign, a fan finder, for example. So often it's, hey, what do you want to budget for this new video's tests with audiences that maybe we know have worked well in the past? Maybe we don't. Maybe it's a totally new artist. Maybe it's an artist that's never advertised before. But regardless, what do you want to spend to test this? And what are you comfortable spending knowing that it may not get you a result? And we're going to monitor over 3, 5, 7 days to parse out what are the knowns that then we can work with down the line. And those knowns can reveal themselves in a lot of ways. It can be front-end metrics like cost per click, views. It can be analysis of audiences and seeing like, okay, well, this ad set that we created with these audiences is outperforming, this one over here. Or it could just be, is this video any good? And we can get into that a little bit more and discuss like the things you should be looking for and the way you should be thinking about your creatives. I think we'll get into that a little bit in this episode too. But that's often the approach that we take with our clients is, what are you willing to burn essentially in a test? And what do we want to learn from it? Like, that's the objective when we're talking about testing.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense for us to spend a little bit more time on just defining testing here, because the rest of the episode we're going to be talking mostly about stability or scaling campaigns. But, testing, there's kind of a problem here that causes people to freak out in scenarios where they may be actually testing, which is, okay, let's say you want to run a campaign to generate sales for a product. There's a specific product you're trying to sell, and you have a defined audience you're trying to sell it to, and you want it to run as long as it possibly can run. You want to be able to feed money into it, get more money back out. Okay, if you're going into that scenario, but you don't know with any reasonable certainty, you have no data whatsoever on what your messaging should be, what the actual ads should be, then you could easily freak out because you just put a bunch of random guesses into the system and you don't know how they're going to be received. And so you're going to be monitoring it to see how they're received. And so more and more these days, we start to look at a difference of ad objectives. One ad objective that's commonly used in a campaign meant for stability is like conversions, or to a lesser degree, traffic. It's the most costly objective that you could run. Usually a conversion is very difficult to get, so you're going to spend a lot more to get any data back. And so if you're throwing a bunch of random guesses into that system, it's easy to freak out. And that's why we might want to consider, let's get you more certain about what you're feeding into that system using some easier objectives. Brand awareness, video views, engagement. These are lighter objectives that cost a lot less money to produce results. And they can't tell you what's going to get you purchase conversions. They can't tell you what's going to get you clicks over to Spotify necessarily. But what they can tell you is out of all of these options for what the ad will be, the creative, the copy, all that, it can tell you which one's your best foot forward. That way, you're spending very little money to get your best foot forward out of all your creative options. And then when you're feeding it into that more stable system, you're a little less nervous that you just threw a bunch of shit in and it's going to start like grinding on it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. That's a really great point and that's often why we stress, especially for newer artists or people that are just getting their digital marketing going, the reason to work your content so hard organically and then learn advertising and take winning content to an ad platform with campaigns like Fan Finder or driving traffic to Spotify with Instagram Reels or whatever it might be. That's kind of the gauntlet where you do creative testing and you see what is working for an audience with one type of asset that you might be able to then plug into, larger campaigns that might be used for something like sales or opt-ins and things like that. That's where we see battle tested over long periods of time, creatives then that stand the test of time in multiple types of objectives for many different kinds of campaigns.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk specifically about campaigns you might run as a musician, right? There are musicians in our community. They're trying to get a general web presence and audience awareness going. And they're running lots of video views campaigns. They're running lots of traffic campaigns. So one is intended to get someone to watch a video, at least 15 seconds. And another is intended to get someone to click over to somewhere else. Usually that destination is Spotify. If you're running a traffic campaign, that's a bit more of a costly objective. And we'd want to go into that knowing what videos we're going to use, what videos are going to get the most attention and get the most clicks. And we can know that based off of past data. So maybe you've been posting videos a lot and you know when one is performing exceptionally better than the others in terms of organic performance. Or maybe you've run some traffic with them and they jump out as a clear winner. But either way, you don't want to go into a traffic campaign without some evidence to suggest that the videos you're using are the best suited out of all that you have.
Right.
Same with a conversions campaign. If you're now going to go a typical one that's run, it's free push shipping and handling. So people are going out to cold traffic saying, we're this band, we have this CD. We bought a certain amount of them to give away for free. You can claim yours, just pay shipping and handling. But they might be using a video in that ad. They might be using different variations or angles on the copy, the message in the ad. And you definitely want to go into that scenario kind of having tested out a wide range of ideas and finding what works best. So in this case, when we're running a testing campaign, we're trying to go for probably the cheapest objective we can find outside of reach. That's video views, that's brand awareness, that's post engagement. There's all different types of objectives we could use at the top of the funnel. All we're trying to see is clear signals across a few metrics. So the structure of a testing campaign more and more for me these days is I'm going to get a set amount of impressions per ad. And you can use automated rules in Facebook Ads Manager to shut off an ad once it reaches a certain amount of impressions. That way we can give 1,000, 5,000 impressions to each ad. And we can use the metrics like cost per milli, CPM, or cost per click or click-through rate to determine which of these ads is the strongest out of the set. And then we can go into a more intense stability-oriented campaign, knowing that we've already kind of gotten that data back and we're only running the stuff that we feel more confident in.
Right, for sure. And I think it's helpful to bring something to the discussion here that we often see with top of funnel objectives. I've seen, chatter about this in our community for a long time about, well, I'm getting cheap views. I'm getting views that are within a benchmark that seems to be okay, or I'm getting clicks that seem to be within a benchmark that is okay, but I don't feel like I'm getting fans. And when you start to get into those types of top of funnel campaigns and you're looking at those types of metrics, it's helpful from a qualitative perspective to also be looking at some secondary metrics, like qualitative secondary metrics, like comments, shares, messages that are coming in, that give you a bit of a better sense early on if the content that you're putting out is, generating interest beyond, the view or the click. Because these machine learning platforms, Facebook ads, whatever, they will find you people that watch. They will find you people that click, but they may not necessarily find you fans,
Yeah, I would say, I would even go so far as to say that if you're running video views or you're running traffic to Spotify, if you don't get any messages and you don't have any comments, I don't care what your cost per click or cost per video view is.
Agreed.
It's not working. And chances are, if you've got a low cost per view, it's the music that's the problem. It's probably something more fundamental, because like great music, even poorly exhibited, typically gets a response, typically gets some comments. Specifically, if people mention, if you see the same people pop up in multiple posts in the comments, that's a bullish sign. If you see people referencing other artists you sound like, that's a bullish sign.
Yep.
These are all good indicators.
Yeah. And if you don't, this is an indicator, like you said, Cirque, to go back to kind of the drawing board of, is it the song? Is it the section? Is it the video? Is it the hook that I'm using? Those are the kind of things to start then digging into and going back to the drawing board with more testing, as opposed to, well, maybe the audience is wrong, or maybe it's just the copy. It's probably the song. This is where your creative really becomes key.
Yeah, I've even had there's one of our best performing songs on Spotify. We made a music video for it that's mostly just a performance video, but it's more well shot, more intentioned. And we ran ads on it. We put it out organically. The comments, there just wasn't a strong amount of comments. There wasn't a strong click-through rate and cost per click. We run a different ad that's me singing, and it's just night and day. Like, there's so many warm comments. Like, it's very obvious when you're creating fans with one of these top of funnel objectives. But yeah, that's where testing would have helped. If we hadn't gone into running ads to get clicks over to Spotify, but instead just use brand awareness or video views or engagement to test these videos against each other and determine which one was our best foot forward, we could have avoided that spend.
You know what's really interesting? I remember you and I having a discussion about when you were doing just that, where you were dropping static posts from Instagram into essentially an Instagram boost campaign.
Yeah.
And just letting them duke it out until you found the ones that were winners, and then moving them into a more stable campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just to illustrate that, like, you should never be panicking before day 4. The only scenario where you should be worried before a week has passed on an ad campaign is if it's not spending at all, which indicates some kind of troubleshooting issue.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a prior benchmark for what your click-through rate should be or your CPM should be, and none of it, you're in a test and none of your creatives are delivering even close to that. That's a reason to panic, because you now have to go spin up more creative because none of this shit's working.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. That's a really good point, because I think a lot of people conversely get stuck on, well, it's not doing well. It's really not doing good. But once I get 7 days, it'll be better. But if you're not getting any front end movement, like you said, if you have a benchmark click-through rate or a benchmark cost per click, let's say, and you're not getting anywhere near that, getting out of learning, well, for one, it's probably not going to happen. But 2, it's not going to save you. Those are all leading indicators that the creatives aren't going to work, that the copy is not working, that the test is a failed test, and you should probably just kill it ahead of time.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, even still, like, if you're doing this testing, like we said, where you're using the cheapest objectives and you're going for anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 impressions before you start to look at the data, again, in Ads Manager, all you do is you select the campaign that you're running, your testing campaign, you go to rules, and then you select shut off any ad where the impressions is greater than, if you're going for 5,000, it can be greater than 4,999, right? As soon as it reaches over that, it should shut the ad off. This way, some ads will do better. They're going to get more spend and they're going to reach that number sooner, but the campaign won't be done until all of the ads have shut off. So you can just leave it running, go make a coffee, all that stuff, have dinner, hang out with friends, come back, and maybe some of these will start reaching their impression cap. But really, it should not be something you're monitoring or worrying about too much. So we've talked about why you kind of should never worry that much. We've talked about, what a testing campaign looks like and how it can make you worry less in a stability style campaign. But now let's kind of get to that 5 days of angst that exists when you launch a new high performance campaign with an objective that's serious, like traffic or conversions. So you can be confident going in, knowing you've tested out your creative options and this is the best foot forward. But now let's talk about what you should prepare for before you actually launch a campaign with a traffic or a conversions objective.
Yeah, I think it's helpful here to categorize what kinds of campaigns fall into what I'll call different windows of monitoring, or how we look at things as media buyers at the agency. What kind of campaigns do we really pay more attention to week to week versus day to day? What are we watching on a daily level even, which these days is less and less.
Well, maybe it's useful to actually just define the learning phase and optimization so people know why the first 5 days, especially, are kind of hands off, which is that Facebook ads, the way that it works is just like the organic reach algorithm kind of works, where at first it doesn't really understand much about who's going to like this piece of media besides past indicators, past performance. So it's going to start off with a bit more of a general guess as to who this ad is best suited for. And then it's going to use data about who responds to the ad to lock in on the person it's right for at the time it's right for them, with the placement and everything. It's going to optimize all these parameters. But your cost per result, if we plot it on a graph, right? Like let's say over here, this axis, we have your cost per result. Over here, we have time. At first, it's going to fluctuate wildly day to day and even intraday until you reach 50 of your target result, which would be for traffic, it would be clicks, 50 clicks. For conversions, it would be 50 conversions. And this is really important to note because conversions can cost, $15, $20, depending on what you're selling. So you're going to fluctuate wildly, meaning that if it goes up really dramatically intraday, that doesn't mean that's where it's going to be at. Once you reach 50 conversions, it should start to stabilize and be a smooth graph. If you're running the best creative that you possibly can, it should go down slightly over time. So the point is that if you're panicking during the learning phase, you're screwed, because you cannot shut it off while it's trying to figure out what your actual results are going to be. But then also, you need to prepare for making it through the learning phase. You should be ready. If your target cost per result is like, let's say $7 per purchase, that's your conversion you're going for. Well, we need 50 of them. So that's 70 times 5, that's $350. You need to be willing to burn $350 all the way up to $600 before you know what your actual cost per result is. So you need to go into a campaign like that knowing I have to burn my target cost per result times 50 plus a little extra padding in case I don't reach it.
Yep. And something else to mention here, Cirque, you mentioned like the roller coaster of results that you might see day to day or intraday. And what often happens still when you run ads of any kind is on the first day, when you first launch, you see amazing results and then you see the drop off. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, that means it's tanking. That means I fatigued my audience. When in reality, what's actually happening there is you're getting the immediate boost of the platform locking in on the right people and then trying to find more of them. And that's what you're seeing happen a lot of times on day 2 or 3.
Yeah, exactly. So even once your campaign is optimized, you will have bad days. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad weeks. And so the right way to do this is, one, we go into any stability campaign with the budget set aside to make it through learning. We go into any stability campaign with all of our parameters that can be tested have already been tested with a much cheaper objective. And that way we at least can make it through that phase. Once we get there, once we get past learning and our target cost per result is achieved, maybe you're looking to get a $7 cost per conversion with a $15 average order value in your cart. So now you're 2xing that money you put into ads before we talk about cost of goods or anything. Okay, great. So you're monitoring your shopping cart to see what your average order value is. You're monitoring your Facebook campaign to see where your target cost per result is. Okay. If at the end of it, we're pretty much within the range of what you wanted to achieve in terms of average order value and cost per result, that's when we really have to not fiddle with it. That's when we really have to start looking at this thing on a week-to-week basis. We monitor a week of performance against the previous week of performance. We do not monitor a day of performance against like your best day. Right?
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. And also, like, it's helpful to not only be monitoring, what Facebook ads says as your source of truth for like how many conversions did I get, what's the cost per, but just monitoring your spend against your total store. Because with the Facebook waterfall effect, like, you're going to see sales come in at high spend that can't be directly attributed to your Facebook ad campaign, but they very likely may be. So it's probably smarter here to just measure how much money am I bringing in total and how much money is going out in terms of ad spend. And monitoring that on a week-to-week basis will prevent you from making these hasty decisions, and it'll allow you to try to focus entirely on efficiency, getting that cost per conversion down, and stability. That's really what you want.
We had a really interesting event happen for one of our clients. Speaking of the Facebook waterfall effect, Cirque, back in June or July, I think it was, back in July, we had a client who was spending around $1,000 a day on sales campaigns, and they were generating about $4,500 to $5,000 back in return selling. And in a lot of ways, Facebook's reporting wasn't telling us that, but we knew that the vast majority of sales in some way, shape, or form were coming from these ads. And that was fine. Everything was, it was gravy. We were comfortable with that, comfortable with knowing that the source of truth was their store and not the band's ad account. And one day, their credit card declined and didn't catch it until the end of the day. Went to their ad account in the morning. It was fine. Didn't look at their ad account again until the night. And somewhere between, their credit card declined and the ad shut off. So what happened was almost no spending that day. It was an interesting test to see, okay, how much is really being driven by their ads, even though the reporting is off. Their sales plummeted. And I was like, oh my God, fix it. Fix the credit card, pay off your credit card, guys. And everything came back to normal the next day, which was amazing. But it lends to that idea of this waterfall effect happening, that you do need to have a source of truth beyond just what the ads manager is reporting to you these days, especially when attribution is just trash.
Yeah, this is not my original idea. This is something that we've picked up from a person who has mentored us in terms of Facebook ads over the last 2 months. But this gentleman talks about how when your ads are running, your any Google search campaigns you're running are going to perform better because there's more interest in that search term driven by Facebook ads. But the coolest one is you're going to get more open rates and click-through rates in your email because people who are on your email list are seeing your ads and now you're top of mind when they go in their inbox. There's a halo effect of when you're running ad traffic, and that's why it makes sense to just monitor your overall sales against your spend. But yeah, just to say that when we're going into a campaign meant for stability, the two keystone examples for artists are going to be traffic over to Spotify, but also to get new fans. And it's going to be conversions for sales. And in each of these cases, until you have 50 conversions, you should not be analyzing what your cost per result is, because you just truly do not know. There are some cases where Jack doesn't mind ruthlessly cutting things that are underperforming, I think.
I'm aggressive because I know how to be aggressive.
Yeah. He's been media buying for like a decade now, so it's a bit diff.
Yeah, too long.
So again, to recap, we're going into that campaign we're only putting things into that kind of campaign that we've already tested. So we're not going to feel a lack of confidence in terms of, is this our best foot forward? We are giving it time to get those 50 conversions, and we're not analyzing anything until then. And we're certainly not panicking. And the reason we're not panicking is because we have a budget going into that we're willing to set on fire. We're willing to take a stack of cash and set it on fire just to figure out, can we get stability out of this? Why? Because first of all, we're probably not going to get zero sales. If we've tested the offer, we've tested the creative, we've tested the campaign, chances are some of that money's coming back. But second, what's the upside? The downside is just your testing budget to get out of learning. The upside is printing 2x on an ad campaign for months if we get it stable. So we're willing to take that bet. Our downside is capped. Our upside is pretty high. And so when it comes to those campaigns, once it leaves learning, which will probably take a week anyways, we're only going to monitor it week to week. Now, there are campaigns that you might monitor day to day, but they're for entirely different reasons. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about them. They primarily fall into the category of top of funnel testing campaigns, like we were talking about. You can do tests where you're monitoring and watching things day to day. Maybe you're killing off audiences that aren't performing well. You're not killing off any people, just ad sets, but you're turning off ad sets that aren't performing well with audiences that seem to be lagging compared to, ones that show signs of winning. Top of funnel, a lot of times you can see quicker what's going to optimize. A lot of times top of funnel campaigns can get out of learning quicker than a 7-day window.
They're going to get out of learning intraday, probably.
Very fast. Very fast. Video views campaigns, getting to 50 views or 50 through plays, which is a 15-second view. That happens really quick if you're spending...
In your first M of CPM, you'll probably... Yeah. In terms of monitoring, like day to day, like every day you're looking at it, if you're running a testing campaign, you might look at it frequently to determine, did I reach my impression cap yet? Can I now analyze my results? In terms of top of funnel objectives like video views, which are largely should be considered longer term testing campaigns, you might monitor day to day. Outside of that, like there's really no reason you should be jumping inside of Ads Manager every single day looking for some meaning, because it probably doesn't exist there.
That's a good clarification. And I think something worth mentioning here is when we talk about monitoring day to day for top of funnel campaigns, you're not comparing, well, on Tuesday, I had 50 clicks over to Spotify, and on Wednesday, I only had 30, or my cost per click on Tuesday was 10 cents, and my cost per click on Wednesday was 30 cents. We're not comparing. We're watching day to day, but we're not comparing day to day, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's say that we have a campaign that's running and it volleys up and down about 10% in terms of your results. And it takes 3 days for each revolution. So 3 days spent below your benchmark, 3 days spent above. Well, in 2 days of spending above your benchmark, it seems like a new trend is forming. Oh shit, my costs are going up. They were higher than they should be yesterday. Now they're even higher than that today. It gives you the impression like, oh, this is going off of the rails. But it could just be normal fluctuations, seasonality, tons of different things that go into, whether you're going to get this target result at the cost you want it. So yeah, there's very few excuses to monitor day to day. Now let's talk about intraday. There is almost no reason whatsoever to check an ad campaign that you've already checked today.
Yeah, I think I gave an accidental example of when it may be helpful to check intraday for errors and things like that.
Yeah, to make sure it's spending. That makes sense.
Largely looking for errors, looking for spend issues, ad disapprovals, major platform disruptions are the kinds of things that if you're checking intraday, that one of the bigger areas that you're looking towards. And that's especially true if you're spending tons of money That's where, and you're trying to get sales. That's helpful to be paying attention to, because that could be the difference of a bad day and a good day. But that's a lot of what I look into.
Yeah, there is a type of campaign that I've been recommending to indies in our live streams where it requires absolutely no monitoring whatsoever. And I did want to touch on that, which is, let's say you're a newer artist, you have nothing to sell yet, you're just trying to grow your fan base. Our goal is to publish content consistently, like on a daily basis, ideally, or multiple times per week. And then over time, make more of the content that does well and less of the content that does poorly. And then take the content that does the best and use it to get new fans in. So in that scenario, I recommend a 2-campaign setup. One would be traffic to Spotify, that we're only using your best performing songs and your best performing content around those songs to actually get those clicks. So for a new fan, every new fan comes in on the same set of songs. They're not coming in off of like all of your whole catalog, and it could be any one of them. We're just going to take the ones that work best and use those to get new people in. But then we're retargeting everyone who has engaged with your profile with your daily content or your weekly content. And in that case, we're constantly swapping out, like you go to Monday, you go to posts on Instagram, and now you're swapping out your Monday posts in that campaign that's constantly revolving. And in that case, you actually don't need to monitor it at all. Because only later, when we go, maybe on a monthly basis, we go and look at all the posts that you've put out over the last month and see what did best. And then we're going to feed that into our traffic to Spotify campaign and see if it can contend with your previous best performing content. Only then will we look at metrics. But this retargeting campaign, it's going to spend maybe $5 a day or $1 a day. And there's no reason to ever check its metrics. There's none whatsoever. So there are some campaigns for which, like, this is supposed to get me data that I'm going to reference later elsewhere. So I'm just going to let it run, and I have a defined budget for that.
Yeah, it's a new application. I mean, maybe not even a new application. It's a realm of thinking about green light warmth.
Yeah, the $1 a day traffic plan.
Yeah, $1 a day traffic, warm audience retargeting. What's cool about that, what I really love about that, is it informs your organic social strategy in the long term. If you're looking at it over longer time horizons than day to day or even week to week, suddenly you already know, this is what I'm using to get new fans. This is what I'm using to acquire new listeners and get attention, right? It's your best performing content. It's your best songs. It's probably the hook, the catchiest chorus, the best looking video, the thing that has gone the most viral. We'll call it that, right? For example's sake. And then in this warm audience campaign that all of those people who are both new and old are seeing, you can morph your content around that as you go and make stuff that's better and better and better over time. Maybe put it into that larger audience driving campaign and see how it contends, like you said. But I love that strategy for having an evolving social media organic strategy.
Yeah, it also prevents you from making big guesses and like wild swings, because every month we're going to review the past month's content. And if there's any like clear outperformers, we're going to put them into your already running campaign, traffic to Spotify, to see if it can contend with everything that's been running there already. We're not changing that campaign. We're not launching a new campaign. We're just throwing it in with the wolves and seeing if it survives. And the reason that that's helpful is because it gives you a clear answer as to what to do with, first of all, when should I create a new campaign? Almost never in that regime. And then when should I try out stuff as a potential like new fan getting device? It's like only when it jumps out in your previous month's data set. And in that case, it really has to prove itself. Otherwise, it's not going to stay in there. And so this way you're not like, oh, I have a new song out, I'm going to create some content around it, and then I'm going to go try to get new fans with it. And it's like, we don't even know if that's a good idea. So we're going into those, it's a stability campaign at the front end to get new fans in, traffic to Spotify. But we're going into it always with tested data that's in a more testing campaign that we never have to monitor. All we have to do is swap out posts. There's just to say that like the way that you campaign architecture and the way you think about what your campaigns are supposed to be and do, it greatly impacts how much monitoring and fidgeting and fussing around you have to do.
Yeah. Existential dread, mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can really think about, okay, if I'm launching something that should be an appreciating asset, a stability campaign, I'm willing to invest into it. Why? Because it's an asset and it's going to potentially perform better for me over time. And so I really need to treat it like that. You don't go and like, plop down like a portion of your net worth on some like stock index and then pull out the next day because it went down 2%, right? Like this is a long-term appreciating asset. So we're just going to hold it. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about media buying all the time, but I feel like we don't get to have discussions where we're explaining our positions and thoughts. It's just us throwing words back and forth at each other.
Yeah.
So this was fun. I hope you guys dug sort of a look into how we operate at the company, both internally as a company and also with our agency clients, and how we think about ads and how we keep cool when things are going well or not going well. Maybe we'll give you guys a little bit of a roadmap to make your own ads better, or at least make your life a little bit better as you're running your music marketing.
Yeah. Whether you've never cracked into using ads to sell music and merchandise before, or you're already well advanced into that, this should provide you more comfort every time you go to run a campaign. Think, okay, is this a stability campaign or a testing campaign? Why? What's the long-term objective? What's the long-term goal that I'm trying to impact with a stable, long-term appreciating asset? If you don't know, chances are you need to go back to the drawing board. You shouldn't just be creating campaigns willy-nilly. And if you can fit it into this framework, this architecture of, I have testing campaigns, they're very short, they're very inexpensive, and they're supposed to shut off. They're supposed to shut off, and I'm supposed to analyze the results once they shut off. Then you're pretty safeguarded from like making ruinous decisions, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This was fun. I hope you guys dug this. We'll see you next time on Creative Juice. Thanks for diving into ads with us. And as we're wrapping up here, you're listening to Summit by Circuline, one of our Indie Awards winners and one of our Indie X clients. So check out Circuline. They rock. If you want to join the ranks of Indie Awards winners, join us inside of Indie Pro, and we'll be doing another awards season very, very soon.
Peace out, yo.